I'm going to talk to you guys about files. These are my favorite tool in the shop, probably next to a lathe. And I think they're one of the most misunderstood and misused tools around. Um, First thing I'm going to go into is how to use one properly. I see a lot of people using files wrong. The two things with a file, you got to remember that it's just a series of chisels. You know, this big one's kind of easy to see. You have a series of small chisels all the way across the file, and that means that it only cuts in one direction. If you draw a file backward across the material this way with any sort of pressure, all you're doing is dulling the file and not doing any work. So you always want to make sure you're cutting away from your hands. The second thing is you don't have to put that much pressure. You only need enough pressure to engage the file. If you push this down harder than that, so if you're really bearing down on the file, first you're going to break files, which sucks because they're not cheap. The second thing is you're loading the file up to the point it's not going to cut well. You actually get a better cut and a quicker cut by using less pressure with your hands. So the proper motion for a long flat file is in a vise, and you want to have it diagonal to the workpiece and push away like this. And you can very quickly flatten. Now there are some exceptions to that. The one big exception is what's called draw filing, which is another thing I see a lot of misunderstanding about. So you'll need a flat or a mill file, an American cut, to draw file. My favorite, absolute favorite files for draw filing are these Bloco ones from made in Portugal. These are just excellent files. They're very hard, good edge geometry, and they don't pill a lot. So when you draw file, you hold the file like this, and you actually can cut both directions. You can either go perfectly straight or slightly diagonal to the workpiece, and you go like this. And what will happen is, you see this is already starting to work very quickly. Because you're going diagonal to the tooth, you're not going to dull it. You do want to move across the file so you wear the file evenly. Like that. You can get a sword really, really flat and straight by doing this relatively quickly if you have a decent underlying grind. So those are two ways to use a file. The other thing you want to be sure of is how you're supporting the work. So far I've just shown you in a vise. You can also do the jewelry style, which is to use what's called a bench pin. Now a bench pin works, this would be clamped to your bench, not obviously in a vise, but I'll show you. Now this becomes a tool rest, so you can place your object against this and file accurately with one hand, guiding with the other hand. Okay. And you can actually file quite well with this. You can also hold very close into your body, and so that's why this is scrap. It's separated. And file this way for shaping. Another great way to use a bench pin is to do a bench pin this way. And this is awesome for using on rounds, so you can use it to support like this. And then what you can do is take your file, a large file, so you can see, and use this as a support. So I'll just file a spiral on the end of this. What I'm doing is just watching where my line is and adjusting using the corner of the file. Now I've just done some fluting, you see? And it's really easy because I can just roll this in here and it's supported. Like that. And you see that cleans up very quickly. So that's the proper way to use files. So the next thing we need to know is how files are graded and how you can purchase them. So files come in two main categories. You have American cut and Swiss cut. So American cut are usually graded under three different grades. You have bastard cut, which is 2 cuts, first cut, which is a fairly coarse cut, and second cut, which is a finer cut. Essentially, the finish the file leaves is a lot to do with how large the file is. In general, a larger file will have a coarser finish. A smaller file will leave a finer finish. European, or Swiss cuts, rather, are graded under a different system. And they're actually a much more accurate system of measurement. So I actually showed you 2 second cuts. That's a difference for whatever. Those are American cuts. So for Swiss cut, there's a number system. The lower the number, the coarser the cut. Starts at 4/0. 4/0 is a relatively coarse file. This is a we're not marked anymore. Oh, this is a 2/0, and you can see it's a relatively coarse, and this cuts pretty quickly. Okay. Now this is the same size file, and this one is a number 1. So this is 2 finer, and this is pretty fine. You can see now it cuts a little slower, but it leaves a much nicer finish. You see? This file I can go probably right to 220 grit sandpaper and finish from there. This one I believe is a 3 or a 4. The 2. And again, it's even finer. So I can, from this file, go straight to 220 or 400 grit sandpaper, no problem. They come in all different shapes. Most of the more interesting shapes are made in the Swiss cut system. The exceptions are triangular and round files. Both of those will be graded in American or in Swiss. You can get them either way. These are what's called chainsaw files because they're designed to sharpen chainsaw blades. And these tend to be slightly harder than needle files, which means they're really easy to snap, and you have to watch how much weight you put on them. Needle files are generally sold in Swiss cut, and good needle files are expensive, but worth the money. These are Hellers from the 40s, and they're still sharp. This is a 6-inch, and this is a 4-inch. See the difference. This is a number 2 cut, I believe, or 3 cut, so it's very fine. And this is a 1 or O, so it's reasonably coarse. And you can see these two are actually the same size file. The smaller one, I'm not sure if this will show up on camera, but this smaller one here is much coarser than this one. So when I'm roughing, I can use this coarser one and then go back with the finer one so that I can polish straight from the file mark. Needle files come in a myriad of shapes. The really common ones are round, square, triangular, flat, and half round. That's probably a good set. There's also what's called a knife edge, like kind of an olet shape, oval shape, and there's a few that are set for there's what's called a Barrett file, which is unsharpened on 2 sides and then has a flat here. There's Warding files, which are really, really thin. And there's these, I forget what these are called, but they're only sharpened on the 2 edges. These flats don't have edges, so they just cut for slotting. And you can get these in all sorts of shapes. One of my favorites to purchase right now are these what's called pillar files. You can get these from McMaster-Carr, and these are actually all graded in Swiss cut. They're reasonably inexpensive, and they're pretty good files. They're straight and set straight on this side, and then they're really nice for getting into guards and flat. You can get these in all different sizes and widths. I get them down to 2-inch widths. Oh, it's not the one I thought it was. Or down to 1/4-inch widths, rather. Oh, that one's got some epoxy. Who knows? All the way down to this size, which is this is an O, so it's relatively coarse. But I can get this into a guard and really get pretty rapid removal of material and not have to worry about taking material off where I don't want it on the safe sides. So file maintenance is essentially about keeping them clean. There's these tools here that are called file cards, and these are really useful for cleaning out the teeth of a file. They're specially shaped so that they draw across the cut of the file and clean out the teeth. If you do get something stuck in there, a bit of metal or whatnot, we call that pilling, and that's when you have little pieces stuck inside. It's very sticky materials like aluminum tend to do this, or copper. And you can use a scriber and catch the tooth and just scrape it out if that does happen. Or you can use, if you're worried about dulling the file with a carbide scribe, which can happen, especially with newer files, then you can use a brass point to just pick out those little needles. You want to make sure you clean your files out, because if you don't clean out that material, what will happen is this will beat up and catch on the work and cause a gouge from galling. And you'll have a nice, even, consistent finish, except where that pill pulled a line. And then you have to refile the whole thing down below that pill, which, sucks. Long-term storage, a lot of people will oil their files, and that's perfectly fine. But you probably want to clean them off before you go to use them. The oil will make the file ride up off the work and force you to use a lot more pressure to cut. A lot of people use chalk on their files. That does reduce pilling. You can use soapstone or just chalkboard chalk. And they make special chalks from jewelry supply companies that are made to chalk files. And it can reduce pilling, especially if you're using files on very gummy materials like copper or some bronzes, silvers, or aluminum. Beyond those, I haven't really found it to be useful. On steel, I don't really notice too much of a difference, so I tend to not bother with the chalking. When you're storing files, you want to store them so that they're not knocking together. I have a very bad tendency to just store them in a toolbox in a drawer like this, and they tend to knock together. All of these files are basically dead anyway. These are my kind of files, and they just kind of go in there. When I have nice files and good ones, what I do is I wrap them in a paper towel like this, and then put them in the drawer. So I lay them all out, and that helps protect them from knocking together, because if the files are rubbing together, like this, they're both as hard as each other, they're going to dull, and that's kind of defeats the purpose of buying files if you're dulling them out by just putting them in your toolbox. Another great way to store files is to drill holes in the edge of your bench, and you can just drop them in the hole, and they can't knock against each other. Or make a little rack like I've done here to hold. I have my triangular file, I have a flat file right here, and I have some square files, my needle files, or my chainsaw files. And that's a great way for files you're going to use all the time to just be readily at hand. A lot of people also will stand up stands and put them in front of themselves, which I find just takes up too much bench space, which is why I don't do it. A lot of people will also use these magnetic tool racks to hold their files. I hate doing that because then it magnetizes the file and stuff gets stuck to the file, and it's pain. And then you need to demagnetize the file. So how you store them is up to you, but you want to make sure that they're not knocking against each other and dulling themselves quickly. I think that's everything I know about files. So enjoy, guys.